always great to be at the LRC. Hopefully I have a microphone that doesn't keep breaking on me.
Regulars will know I've given Ian the special quiet microphone.
Yeah. I was going to be really quick as well. Listen, obviously, this last couple of weeks have been unbelievable, really, from the Bakers Union, and obviously our members. Some of them you'll have met yesterday, some of them you'll have seen in CLP, some of them you'll have seen, you know, in various different fringe meetings. Those young people that have taken it upon themselves to stand up for their workmates. Let me tell you, before they actually decided to ballot for strike, those people came together in a pub in Woolwich, from Crayford and from Cambridge, and they arrived at that pub, not in a trade union, never taken industrial action, never really been able to get past registering their first stage grievance in their shop, never actually considered how they could work collectively together. This was about the end of June, 2 weeks before we notified the company of what happened at that meeting, where they stood up one by one and said they were no longer prepared to accept people, and everybody who read the Adichie Chakrabarty story couldn't have failed to be moved. No longer were they prepared to accept somebody like Tyrone, a 17-year-old lad that was doing all right. He was working a 40-hour week. A manager came in, his face didn't fit, so he cut his hours to 8, so he couldn't afford his rent, so he lost his flat, to end up sleeping on his mate's sofa, or on his mate's floor. They said that's unacceptable for them. It's not acceptable that their workmate should have to live his life like that. It's not acceptable that the manager has that much power in their hands and they have none whatsoever. And they were not going to stand by and allow it to continue to happen. They weren't going to allow the woman who'd been abused, who went to work, her boss knew, but because he runs his store by shouting in your face, despite the fact she'd had a nervous breakdown, despite the fact he was aware of her medical condition, thought it was funny to humiliate her on the shop floor of that McDonald's shop, thought it was okay to abuse her in a way in what she felt was so bad that it had caused her to have a mental health issue. Those workers said that's not acceptable. It's not acceptable that people who come out to work, their pay is so low because McDonald's, despite the fact that it has over $20 billion a year on average in profit, pays its workers related to your age, never above what it's legally obliged to, where workers can see one another, whether they come and pick the kids up from school, those kids having to go with their parents to food banks because their pay is so low, and they stood up one another and said this is not acceptable. They said in 2 shops, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds, 24-year-olds, 27-year-olds, 42-year-olds, because they often forget, because they want you to believe this story, that the people in McDonald's are all youngsters and these are starter jobs, because that enables them to get away with the exploitation of those workers, to express the amount of profit that they can get out of those workers while nobody pays attention to what they're doing, because these jobs don't matter. These jobs don't matter. That's what we want you to believe. When he was organising those workers, the most questions we got was, why don't they go and get another job? 119,000 people are employed by McDonald's. Where's 119,000 people going to find a job? And what jobs will it be? What jobs are there out there for these people to take if they give up their jobs in McDonald's? The jobs in the KFC? the subway. I mean, even if they want to go and be in care. Because, you know, the facts of the matter are this. It doesn't matter now which part of the economy you're working in. Because most of it is now at ground zero level, isn't it?
Yes.
Most of it now is about 0-hour contracts and the minimum wage, because that's all they need to pay. They only have to pay us what they're legally obliged to do. Well, those people in McDonald's, they said that's unacceptable. And they said the workers who are unorganisable, the workers who have no representation, the workers who are being told, accept your lot. We ain't accepting it. We're going to work and stand collectively. We're going to send a signal which will be historic. We're going to take a ballot. We're going to go on strike, and we're going to stand up. We're standing up for the people like Tyrone to say sofa surfing should not be acceptable in the fifth richest economy in the world. 0 hours contracts have to be stopped, and we're going to make this war against McDonald's, because they were the pioneers of them that brought them into this country in 1974. They said, we will go on strike. Despite the facts they were getting threatened, despite the facts they were told by their manager that they will be prosecuted and put in prison to deter them, they said, we are going on strike. We are not accepting our lot anymore. And the fact of the matter is this, because when those workers stood up and did that, it sent a clear signal, and which is why it was so important on the 2nd of September. We rocked up to a place in Finchley where they had their head office, because for the historians in the room will know that in Finchley was the architect of the attacks on the trade union movement and the attacks on the NUM. And in 1983, when she was opening that office, while she was planning her war on us, she thought that that would be the symbol and usher in the new wave of employment that we would all have to suffer under. Maximise the profits for them, minimise the ability for us to have a decent life. Well, you know what? On the 2nd of September, we rocked up and we took the forecourt of their building, and we said, well, Thatcher's gone, we're still here, the Labour movement's back. These McDonald's workers are building a new movement. These McDonald's workers are trying to stand and lead, because that's when you see them, when you see what they have achieved, it's an incredible signal. Because when McDonald's workers go on strike, anyone can strike. And if we're going to build a better country, and we've got to fight, look at those workers and take the lead. Because I'm telling you now, it's the only way we've ever won. It's the only way we'll ever win. It's the only way they ever listen to us. When we grow up in a ball, they keep kicking us. The time is now. Those McDonald workers are inspirational, and we have to show them. We've heard their voices. It's no longer acceptable for 0 hours. It's no longer acceptable for wages that make people have to go to a food bank to live. It's no longer acceptable that the nurse asks the Prime Minister to be, why do I need to go to a food bank? And it becomes a complicated answer. That's what happens when we allow them. When we allow them to control our agenda. That's what happens when we fail to stand together. And I'll tell you something else, because this freedom of movement stuff that people want to talk about across Europe, actually, freedom of movement is a human right. And it shouldn't just be about freedom of movement in Europe. It should be about freedom of movement wherever you're born in the world, wherever you come from. No migrant worker or person born outside of the UK is responsible for the poverty that the people who I represent have. That was done by politicians and in corporate boardrooms who took those politicians out for their meals to enable them to receive the policies that enabled us to live in the society that we now have. And we failed to challenge. We failed to challenge, but now we're awake. I hope. If not, I'll have to get a little louder. Because the time is here. You heard Mark before. The connection between all of us, whether you're in the private sector and the public sector, we can all see the impoverishment around us. You'll walk on the streets of Brighton, of any town or city. It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. And we must make sure that we do the things that we need to do, which is stand together in solidarity with a worker, whether they come from Europe, whether the worker that's come from Africa, whether it's a worker from anywhere, whether they were born in this country or not born in this country. The reality is, we stand together, it stops them dividing us. We fight together, we start to see victories. And when we all realise who those architects of our hardship are, then we all win together. And when that call comes, whether it's the CWU, whether it's the PCS or the FBU or the IWGB who's going to take out precarious workers tomorrow, and if you're in London, go and join them, you know, or whether it's for climate change, whatever the issue is, like those fantastic Preston New Road, you know, people standing up for our climate. If we want a country that's fit for us all, then we're going to have to fight for it. We're going to have to stand up and demand our rights. So to the LRC, where I always love to come, thank you very much for indulging me.